The Untouchables. Who were they and why they became the Untouchables? By Baba Sahib Ambedkar. Part 1. Chapter 1. 2. Turning to ancient society, the notion of pollution prevalent therein was not materially different from what was prevalent in primitive society. There is difference as to the sources of pollution. There is difference regarding purificatory ceremonies. But barring these differences, the pattern of pollution and purification in primitive and ancient society is the same. Comparing the Egyptian system of pollution with the primitive system, there is no difference except that in Egypt it was practiced on an elaborate scale. Among the Greeks, the causes of impurity were bloodshed, the presence of ghosts, and contact with death, sexual intercourse, childbirth, the evacuation of the body, the eating of certain foods such as pea soup, cheese, and garlic, the intrusion of unauthorized persons into holy places, and in certain circumstances, foul speech and quarreling. The purificatory means, usually called kaupia by Greeks, were lustral water, sulfur, onions, fumigation, and fire, incense, certain boughs, and other vegetative growths, pitch, wool, certain stones and amulets, bright things like sunlight and gold, sacrificed animals, especially the pig, and of these, especially the blood and the skin. Finally, certain festivals and festival rites, particularly the ritual of cursing and the scapegoat. One unusual method was the cutting of the hair of the polluted person or sacrificial communion with the deity. A striking feature of the Roman notion of pollution and purification is to be found in the belief of territorial and communal pollution and purification. Parallel to the lustratio of the house is the periodical purificatory ritual applied to a country district, Pagi. The lustratio Pagi consisted in a religious procession right round its boundaries with sacrifice. There seems to have been in ancient days a similar procession round the walls of the city called Amberbium. In historical times, special purification of the city was carried out when a calamity called for it, that is, after the early disasters in the Second Punic War. The object of all such expiations was to seek reconciliation with the gods. Lustral ceremony accompanied the foundation of a colony. The Therminalia, protective of boundaries, and the Compitalia of streets in the city were also probably lustral in their origin. Down to the late period, priests called Luperci perambulated in the boundaries of the earliest Rome, the settlement on the Palatinate. Earlier, there was an annual solemn progress round the limits of the most ancient territory of the primitive city, and it was led by the archaic priesthood called the Arval Brotherhood. The ceremony was called Umbravalia, and it was distinctly peculiar. When Roman territory was expanded, no corresponding extension of the lustral rite seems ever to have been made. These roundabout peculiar surveys were common elsewhere, inside as well as outside Italy and particularly in Greece. The solemn words and prayers of the traditional chant, duly gone through without slip of tongue, seems to have had a sort of magical effect. Any error in the pronouncement of these forms would involve a need of reparation, just as in the earliest Roman legal system. The mispronunciation of the established verbal forms would bring loss of the lawsuit. Other forms of quaint ancient ritual were connected with the peculiar conception. The Salili, ancient priests of Mars, made a journey at certain times round a number of stations in the city. They also had a cleaning of the weapons and a cleaning of the trumpets, which testified to a primitive notion that the efficiency of the army's weapons required purification. The washing lustrum with which the census ended was in essence military, for it was connected with the comitia centuriata, which is merely the army in civil garb. Lustratio exercitus was often performed when the army was in the field to remove superstitious dread which sometimes attacked it at other times. It was merely prophylactic. There was also an illustration of the fleet. Like all primitive people, the Hebrews also entertained the notion of defilement. The special feature of their notion of defilement was the belief that defilement was also caused by contact with the carcass of unclean animals, by eating a carcass, or by contact with creeping things, or by eating creeping things, and by contact with animals which are always unclean, such as every beast which divided the hoof and is not cloven footed, nor chewed the cud. Whatsoever goes upon his paws among all manner of beasts that go on all fours. Contact with any unclean person was also defilement to the Hebrews. Two other special features of the Hebrew notion of defilement may be mentioned. The Hebrews believed that defilement might be caused to persons by idolatrous practices or to a land by the sexual impurities of the people. On the basis of this survey, we can safely conclude that there are no people primitive or ancient who did not entertain the notion of pollution. The end.